Hey guys, thanks for checking out this episode of Tales from a Small Town Journalist, the podcast dedicated to all the weird and wonderful stories that you are only going to hear about from reporters working in small communities. Small communities probably a lot like yours. My name is Matt Shore, and I was a full-time journalist for almost 10 years before I hung up my camera and my notepad. And even today, I still kind of exist out on the periphery with a weekly humor column in the Leaf Chronicle newspaper out of Clarksville, Tennessee. So I'm still kind of in the know of some of the stuff that's going on. And I do like to keep in touch with all of my colleagues who are still there. Before we go any further, I want to make sure and mention that this is a listener-supported podcast, supported by wonderful folks just like you. One of the all-time best ways that you can support us is by spreading the word. Let people know about us. Tell people all about this crazy new podcast out here, talking to small-town journalists and getting all of their crazy stories and putting them all out there. Tweet it out, Facebook it out, Snapchat it out, Instagram it out, Vero it out, TikTok it out, YouTube it out. Have I missed anybody? Whatever, anything else out there that you can think of, Tumblr, Flickr, if you've got a way of putting this out and getting the word out about us, hey, do it. We absolutely want you to. Tell a friend, tell a loved one, tell a neighbor, run out to some person out on the street. I've said this many times now. Grab them by the shoulders, shake them real good, and say, listen, you have got to listen to Tales from a Small Town Journalist by Matt Shore. It is vital that you do this. There certainly won't be any sort of legal ramifications for doing that, I assure you. This episode, we're going to be delving into something that feels like a rather natural extension of the podcast medium. And it kind of begs the question why it took me so long to make this happen. We're going to be delving into radio. Going to be talking to Gil T. Wilson from WTYE Radio. Gil has been in the radio gig all of his life, and he also on the side has a podcast that he runs, which is about all things nerdy. Superheroes, comic books, television, movies, pop culture, anything and everything that kind of you would expect a nerdy person to be into. That's what he talks about. That's his focus there. And radio is a rather unique animal. We've talked to print journalists, we've talked to television journalists. This is the first time talking to a radio journalist. Radio it's unlike any other medium out there in a whole lot of ways. And because of that, the people who are in there who do this kind of job full time, they too are really unique. And Gil is a prime example of this. And because of their uniqueness, these guys have some really unique stories to tell. Let me tell you. Gil's got some crazy experiences to tell us about. They're wild, they're bizarre, borderline unbelievable at times. It's really going to be a fun time. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get to some of this craziness right now. Let's get Gil on the line and hear all about some of the crazy small town experiences from the radio side of journalism. All right, I am here with Gil T. Wilson. By the way, that is an awesome use of your middle initial there. There has to be a professional wrestler out there somewhere kicking himself for not thinking of that first. Gil is an on-air personality for WTYE Radio and the, I believe, creator as well as host of the NerdUp Podcast. That is your baby, am I right?
That is correct, yeah.
So anyway, we're speaking with a radio personality, podcaster, Gil T. Wilson. Gil, how you doing?
I'm doing really good. In fact, I'm here in the studio, staying out a little bit later after work just so I can talk to you. And I don't want to leave the radio station ever. I love radio. So, of course, my wife wants me home once in a while.
That is the ongoing struggle, I guess, right?
Right.
Well, I was real curious to speak with you because I've had experience working within television a little bit, not a whole lot, but a little bit. Also, of course, extensive working within a newspaper, but I've always been out on the periphery when it comes to radio. So this will be fascinating for me. Radio's a really unique kind of animal, I think. Am I right?
Oh, definitely so. I still, to this day, can never figure out why I really wanted to get into this. Now that I'm in it, and I was like, I'm not getting rich. Okay, there's that. Why? Oh, you gotta love it. It has to be a passion for you to stick around in radio. And there's guys that, that's all they do all their entire lives. Like recently, we just lost a morning show host there, and that's actually why I got the job here. But he had been on the air here at this radio station for 50 years.
Whoa.
He was good. He was happy. That's all I need. So he passed away pretty much, on the air. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's like the day he got ill, like his last like one shift. Well, what now is his last shift. He got sick, said I don't feel so good. And then the weekend he passed away. So interesting.
Wow, that'd be quite a legacy too. Was that intimidating to try to fill those shoes?
That's why I got the afternoon. He was the morning guy.
Smart move.
And they said, we need somebody to replace him. I'm like, how about if I do the afternoons and this other guy does the mornings? Because I don't want to replace someone like that. Because, you're going to get the callers and saying, oh, well, this guy, Roger, was his name. Roger used to do it this way. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not Roger.
Well, so, this is touching on what I wanted to get into. The thing is, journalists of all beats, whether it be television, print, radio, they got really unique stories that nobody else is going to have. And I imagine radio has some really particular types of offbeat, amusing, maybe even weird stories. Am I right?
Well, yeah. That's a good way to put it, yeah. Let me start with the one with my name, Gil T. Wilson. First of all, actually, before that, this radio station that I'm working at right now, this is in my hometown. I graduated high school from this town back in 1984. Anyway, that my senior year, they had a fundraiser here on the air at this radio station in which you could get your teachers arrested, so to speak, and they get thrown in jail, and they could get the money raised, either bailing them out or pay them to get them arrested. Went to whatever the charity was that they were raising money for, and so as I had to raise money, we all wanted to put a teacher in the jail. And so we got the money together, and I came out to the radio station, and they interviewed me for a while, and I got to help the guy out because it was just too much fun. And I realized at that moment, 1984, that that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. That is cool. And so not long after, I joined the Navy, and I worked for Armed Forces Radio Network for a little while, off and on through my career. I was mainly an air traffic controller, but whenever I could, I'd volunteer for the radio stations.
I have to ask real quick, did you ever at any point find an excuse to say, "Good morning, Vietnam"?
No, they told us not to.
Okay, I don't blame them. I'm ashamed of myself for asking.
Well, actually, what they said is that that Robin Williams movie? I said, yeah. He goes, forget it ever happened. Oh, okay, I see. So anyway, so I then went to college and this became my career. But what happened is I worked at a couple stations throughout while I was going to college. I kind of finagled to say, oh yeah, I'm experienced in radio. I mean, Armed Forces Radio, why not? Yeah. And so I worked at radio stations while I was learning to be a radio guy. And so I worked at mainly like college stations or rock stations. Well, I went to work at a news station. The news director said, Gil Wilson, that just doesn't flow right. We need a hard consonant separating your name. He goes, how about Jack Wilson? I'm like, no, I don't want to change my name. That's me, and I was proud of that. So I go, well, how about this? My middle initial is T. And he goes, Gil T. Wilson. Oh, that sounds good. Okay, we'll use that. So I went on, didn't think anything of it. I worked at that station for about a year or two. And then I went over to a college radio station as the morning guy, and got on the air and said, "Hey, Gil T. Wilson here with you. Going to bring you all the hits, and hope you're having some fun because we're taking over with a vengeance." And so I said, "Gil T. Wilson, talk to you in a minute." And then I played a song, and immediately the phone rang, and the guy goes, "Gil T, I get it." And I'm like, and at that moment I'm like, oh. So do I. I had never put that together. And so I jumped on it, and that's why I've used it ever since.
Oh, that's pretty good.
So, yeah, it's one of those things, you just use it, you don't think about it, and then, oh, hey, it is funny.
Makes me think of, I don't know why, but it makes me think of Mick Foley and how he, for a while, was Cactus Jack, and when he first show he ever did, he said, Bob, they said, where are you from? And he's like, I don't know, Indiana. They said, no, that sucks. You need something with cactuses in it. He's like, okay, what about Arizona? And the guy called the show that at that moment just said, I think there's a truth or consequences in Arizona. And that became his hometown for like a decade.
I'll be darned. I never knew that, but it makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm curious, did you ever work any late nights working for radio?
Oh, there were a few times I tried to avoid it, even because mainly I'm a night owl and I like to do things at night. I had one overnight shift, and it didn't last long. I don't know why. I'm a night person. I'm more energetic, but and I hate morning radio. I never do that. Yeah, but afternoons is my thing. That's my jam. So,
Oh, okay.
And now I will say that I've been everything that you can do in radio. I've done it. Okay, I mean I started out just doing news and little things here and there. Then I became a DJ. I've done the traffic where, scheduling and commercials. I've done sales. I've done engineering. But on air is like the best because there you don't have any responsibilities. You just got to make people laugh,
Gotcha.
And at least in this type of radio. But I will say that some of the best things, like the guy we have here now at this radio station in the morning, his name's Tony Collins. But he does news, and he also we have fun on the air here. We're one of those fun stations, and during the morning, Tony he'll like when he does the news, he goes by the name Tony Collins. Well, years ago, the station used to have the booth in the engineering room, and you could hear all the equipment going, and you could hear all the fun noises and fans and all this stuff. And he said on the air, he goes, wow, he goes, this is a noisy place. He goes, I feel like I'm a captain of a starship or something. He goes, that's it, I'm Captain Radio. So from then on, he went on the air. When he was doing the DJ stuff, he'd go on as Captain Radio. He goes, hey, Captain Radio here. Never changes his voice. With news, I'm Tony Collins. Hey, here's the next song, I'm Captain Radio. And it's really cool. Well, the thing about it, though, is we get this one lady called up. She goes, I love that Tony Collins in the morning. His news is the best, whatever. But she's just gushing over Tony Collins. She goes, but I hate that Captain Radio guy. He's annoying. and ever since then, I keep telling Tony, I was like, hey, I like you, but I hate Captain Radio. So it's amazing what the listeners perceive from a radio station. It's like it's the same guy, and he never changes his voice. That's what gets me. It's like, how can you not tell?
I feel like that kind of illustrates part of what makes radio so unique from all other types of journalism. In my case, is with when you do a print newspaper, as I did for so long. I mean, that's all your focus is news, the next story, getting the next thing out, getting the paper out, all that sort of thing. Even if you have an online presence, getting it up there, but it's still basically your focus is news. And even in a television studio, even though you have more concerns, it's still the same thing. It's this one broadcast that you're really worried about. So all you're focusing on is news. Whereas with radio, you guys have to basically cover all the content that goes out 24 hours a day in a sense. And I know so much of it is automated now, but I mean, you basically have to go from presenting the news to presenting music to comedy to whatever else the station might need.
Yeah. And then the thing is about it, like right now I'm in a small town radio station. I used to work at a corporate radio in Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas. But anyway, it was, huge market there. Most of the stations there are automated. They'd have like some live shifts. And it's there's nothing to it. It's just like song, liner, song. It's really boring. Commercials every once in a while. But here at the small town radio, I mean, we're responsible for keeping everybody informed about everything, whether it's like the church having a picnic this weekend or whatever. At the same time, though, we're playing music. And then, like right now, we got a weather system that moved through the area. You kind of have to be a meteorologist so you can know, okay, do I need to run up to the radio station and start talking to people live, telling them how to where to go for cover for a tornado? Tony, the other guy here, basically he and I text each other at night. Well, it looks like it's going to just miss us or whatever. And at a moment's notice, we'll come right out to the radio station, turn off the automation, go live on the air. Because in the evenings we're automated, but during the daytime, 100%. And I got to do my own. He does his local news. He shares the stories with me, and then I'll take care of all the just for on-air purposes for my shift, national news. And my thing is, I love to make fun of celebrities. So I'll find some kind of story about a celebrity and find a way to make fun of them. I pick on the Kardashians a lot, Taylor Swift, and Justin Bieber. Those are my three targets.
They give you a lot of material, I'm sure.
Oh, they do too. So they make it easy.
There's another podcast by a guy people might have heard of, Kevin Smith, who they get a lot of mileage out of making fun of Justin Bieber on one of his shows.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I listen to that one a lot. In fact, that's the one that influenced me to start my podcast, pretty much.
Oh, fantastic. That's cool. Well, I do want to talk about your podcast, but I did have one last question as far as when I asked about late nighters, that tends to be where the weird stuff happens. So what I was curious about, what is at least one of the weirdest experiences that you have had in this line of work?
Oh, I got one for you.
All right.
All right. So this is back in Kansas City. We did a lot of concerts. Our group of stations actually were major sponsors of the local venue where all the concerts were happening. And so we were there at every freaking concert. Sometimes it's great. Like I saw Bob Dylan like 50 times, I think. So, I mean, that was great. I loved it. But there's times where it's like, I don't want to be here. But anyway, we always had a contest whenever, hey, show us, we wanted people to wear our shirts. And so it was 101 the Fox. Said, show us that you have 101 the Fox on your body and you may get upgraded to front row seats. And we had this promotions person. She's going through and she'd spot people in the audience and she'd find one lucky couple that had 101 the Fox on their T-shirt and pick them and take them up front. Well, we had a booth at the front of the arena right before people come in, and this lady comes up to me and she goes, oh, I want to get front and center. And I said, okay. I said, well, it looks like all you have to do is wear 101 the Fox. She goes, oh, I am. And she pulls down her shirt and on her breasts written 101 the Fox in very bright colors and very nicely done too, very artistic. And I'm like, she goes, you going to put me up front now? I said, hey, I appreciate that. That looks nice, but she is the one in charge of upgrading. And I don't think that's going to help. She goes, well, darn it, my brother worked on this all day.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm like, you lost me. That is no more. So, yeah, they're out there.
Oh, gosh. That's fantastic. And bizarre.
Yeah, exactly. Well, see, like I said, that's cool, that's fun. It's women showing themselves at me. Her brother did that?
Yeah, that is one heck of a buzzkill, right?
Right.
Oh gosh. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, that seems like a great moment to segue over to your podcast, the NerdUp Podcast. What you touched on this a bit on what inspired you to get that started, but let's dive into that. What was the birth, the brainchild of the NerdUp Podcast?
There's a whole bunch of things came together for that. Again, first of all, being in radio all these years, I love to talk, and I love the equipment. I love making commercials, and I like mixing stuff. And anyway, for a while I was operations manager for a radio station, which meant I was in charge of everybody. I didn't get any on air time, and I missed it. So I was like, I want to be back on air. And then at the same time, I opened up a comic book shop with a friend of mine. And to promote that comic book shop, we were like thinking, we got to figure some way to promote it, kind of really nicely. And at the same time, I started listening to Kevin Smith's Hollywood Babylon podcast. And he is one of those guys that if you got art to make, go out and make it. Don't worry about what anybody else is going to say. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take his words to heart. I'm going to make a podcast. So the other guy that owned the comic book store with me, I had the equipment. We also had access to studios if we needed it. And we just started doing a podcast to promote the comic book store. And then after a while, he moved to Florida. I shut down the store. And I was like, no, I still need to keep this podcast. So it became the NerdUp Podcast, and the rest is history. I've just been interviewing people and talking about nerdy things.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those nerdy things. What other stuff do you touch on with that?
Well, it falls anywhere from video games to movies to cons. We'll attend cons. Basically, once I got it rolling by myself, the guy moved away. I called up some college friends of mine, some people that I graduated with a radio television degree and a theater degree. And these guys were in the theater department, so I knew they liked to perform. And so I asked them, I said, hey, you guys want to talk nerdy in there? Oh, yeah, let's talk comic books, So I got them, and we just talking to you, we just Skyped in together, and we all started talking about different movies and TV series. And when one time there's at Indianapolis, they had Indie PopCon the first year, and we're like, oh, let's go to that. This would be great. And we got one of the guys from North Carolina. One guy lives in Chicago. One guy lives down in Southern Illinois. And here I am in the middle of Illinois. And I was like, well, let's meet up at Indie PopCon. And so we did. And we went through and interviewed several artists, several celebrities that were there. I got tired of interviewing celebrities at cons, though. They're usually busy, and plus, some of them are jerks.
Oh, man.
I got one in particular that I said, nope, no more celebrities. But anyway, so it was like, we just went all out and just started talking about anything that was nerdy. And I mean anything. And the guys would say, hey, you want to talk about this? Yeah, why not? New Star Trek series. Yeah, let's talk about that. New Star Trek movie. Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's watch. At one time we watched a movie from 1987 or something like that. I can't remember the name of it. Darn it! It had Kyle MacLachlan in it, but it's like a time travel thing. And it was so we watched. It was a very bad '80s movie.
Oh, there are no bad '80s movies. If it's the '80s,
it's so bad it's good.
I don't know what it is, but there's something about the '80s. They've got some kind of charm. It just, I don't know. I'm enthralled.
Exactly.
Even if it's the worst film ever made, if it's from the '80s, I'm there.
And I think I'm with you, because that's one of the things that it turned out is like, holy cow, you could see the strings, you could see all the special effects, what they were doing. But gosh darn it, it was so fun to watch this movie. And so, and that's what came out of that. And that's, just about anything. My son and I, he's also on the podcast with me. We go to the local theater and we'll go watch a movie and then go home and talk about the movie on the podcast. So, it's just, I like to talk. Pretty much anything will happen. So, yeah.
Well, I'll give my own little endorsement for your podcast. I'm a fan of it. And one of the things that I appreciate, I'm really picky when it comes to any sort of, nerdy podcast, we'll just call it that. So much of it comes from a place of negativity. And I appreciate that yours is there's some genuine love for what's going on here. There's no anger over what's happening. That's not to say that you don't voice, critiques or things that you might disagree with going on. But I've yet to tune into your podcast and hear the usual. Here's an easy one: is the anger felt over The Last Jedi.
Okay. Yeah.
I am not defending that film, but it does get kind of tiresome constantly seeing and hearing people just. Anytime I try to find something talking about pop culture, if it comes up on Star Wars, there's a lot of anger in that particular genre right now.
Right. And you know what? Here's my deal with that. In our podcast, the group of guys that we have one guy that does hate everything, but that's kind of his role. He's the devil's advocate. And the rest of us, we have our own quirks. But my thing is, if I don't like it, I'm not talking about it.
Yeah.
Why waste time on something negative? And so if I have a blog where I write book reviews, and my wife's all the book reviews that I do, they're all like pretty much glowing reviews. My wife goes, "You love every book you read?" And I said, "No, I just don't review the ones that I don't like. In fact, most of the ones I don't like, I quit halfway through. So it's like I don't do anything that's going to be negative in my life. If a book I don't like, I'll stop reading it. A movie I don't like, I saw it, I'm done with it, So I try to stay that, but again, we do have that troll in our group. There's enough of them out there on the internet, but we have one in our group that, because you have to have one that's kind of like, again, devil's advocate, and he'll do it. He likes the role.
Speaking of Kevin Smith, there's a Ralph Garman on every podcast.
Exactly. See, yeah, and that's what he is. He's our Ralph Garman. His name is Tim Matson. He's the one that lives out in North Carolina, and and the thing is, it's not necessarily that Tim's going to hate this. It's just his view of it. He's not the guy. I hated it. it sucks. No, he'll go and say, okay, here's why I didn't like this part of it. He'll actually, and when he's done, it's like you're thinking, you might be right. Like, no, wait, I loved it. Never mind.
Right. So do you have any offbeat experiences from the podcast? Any, that one is, I don't know, it might not lend itself to some of the weirdness that radio would, but.
No, definitely not. But I got one great one, and I can talk about this actor because he's passed away. And so he's no longer with us, but he's a real jerk. His name's Ron Glass. You may know him from Firefly, the TV series, or Barney Miller.
I know Firefly.
Yeah, he was the Reverend on the Firefly.
Oh no, I loved that character.
Yeah. Well, at Indie PopCon, he was there, and I was like, oh my God. I watched him back in the Barney Miller days in the 70s, and it's like, I used to crack up, and he was funny. There's one episode there where they, somehow the police force, someone slips him some hash brownies, and he gets really high, and it's freaking hilarious. So I'm like, oh, I got to go talk to this guy. Plus, he's from Indiana. And so he's like, a native son, so to speak. And so I'm like, oh, I got to talk to this guy. So I go up there. There's nobody in his line. And, him and his handler, for lack of a better word, they're just sitting there talking. So I go up there and I say, hey, Mr. Glass, I said, I want to let you know I'm a big, huge fan. I'm wondering if you'd like to be interviewed for my podcast. And he goes, what? And I said, for a podcast. I said, I talk about nerdy things, and I gave him my business card. And then I said, yeah, we broadcast this on, what's a podcast? Well, it's kind of like a radio broadcast, but it's only for people on computers, and there's apps or whatever. And he goes, oh, no, I'm here for the fans, not you.
Oh.
And I turned around, and there's absolutely nobody near him. And I'm like, okay. And so I looked at him one more time. I said, are you sure about this? I said, just nice thing. We can talk about what's coming up for you. We can promote something. He goes, I don't like media. And he turned around and walked away. And I'm like, holy cow.
Oh, my goodness.
So I don't know what I did to make him mad, but I tried not to.
So he's not a holy man off screen.
Right. Yeah, definitely not.
Oh, man. My delusions are shattered. Oh, gosh.
But he's a great actor, apparently.
Yeah, he fooled me.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And I'll give him his credit. That guy is a great actor. He's a great comedic actor. And in Firefly, he pulled that role off perfectly. But as a person, he didn't like me. Didn't bother hiding it, apparently. Right.
Oh. And you're so amicable. What's the deal there?
I know.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, nobody who doesn't like me.
Right. Oh gosh. I haven't had a whole lot of experience interviewing celebrities, not yet, but I did get kind of lucky. I don't know if you're familiar with a gentleman by the name of Bob Carter. He's a voice actor that I met at a convention here, and he voiced Shao Kahn in one of the Mortal Kombat games.
Right.
And I didn't get to interview him, but he was kind enough to do a intro, and I used this on my last episode where he introed the show, and then at the end he introed the entire show as Shao Kahn.
Nice.
Which, that made my day. I was so happy about that.
There's one time I interviewed Nolan North, lost the entire interview except for the part where he told me his favorite voice work that he ever did, which ended up being Deadpool. He's done a lot of voice work. He's in the Uncharted series and video games. I'm trying to think what else. Deadpool, quite a few things. And I lost the entire interview.
Oh, no.
Like I said, except for the one part where he goes, oh, I love doing Deadpool. And I'm like, and he even did something for me. He said, hey, you're listening to NerdUp Podcast, but he did it in like 4 different voices at the same time, like one right after another. And it's like, it was so cool, but I don't know what happened. It wasn't, just part of the recording was there.
I have had that happen to me once and had to call the guy back and say, do you mind if we do that interview all over again?
Yeah, that's why every time I go to a con, I look for Nolan North again, because I'm like, hey, I lost the last one. I got to find you again.
You got to make up for that.
Yeah, I think he's going to be at the Indiana Comic-Con this year in Indianapolis, so I might see if I can find him there.
Okay. Well, good luck to you on that.
Thanks.
Well, I think we should wrap things up here. So one last question I think that is appropriate given your podcast and the nerdiness that you like to promote. In your mind, what is your favorite comic book superhero of all time?
Easy. Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Yeah, all my life, my entire life. In fact, when my son was born, he's now 18, getting ready to go to college. But when he was born, when he would sit on my lap in a recliner, and we watched the '90s version of Spider-Man animated series.
I remember that.
Yeah, and we watched the whole thing. And then by the time he could talk, he was naming all the villains that they show on the screen at the intro of that. And so I was like, yeah, I got him taught right. Now that's his favorite too. But ever since I could read, which I think was around 3 or 4 years old, I did start early because my dad wanted me to. Anyway, he brought me home comic books, and that I just started reading them as much as I could. I loved the pictures, but he started teaching me the words, and Spider-Man comics were the ones that got me.
That's fantastic. I have said this to several people. He's not my all-time favorite, but I think Spider-Man might be the greatest comic book superhero ever created.
Yeah, I'd agree with that because, first of all, he's every man.
Exactly,
yeah. Every kid sometimes, depending on which age they put him in, which run of comics they're going to do. But, yeah, I mean, he could be me. And that's what I loved as a kid is that could be me. I could be bitten by a spider.
Yeah, and at the same time, somehow, and it's because of the costume, but somehow he is also larger than life. It's this amazing balance that when they created him, that they struck gold with that.
Yeah, and the humor too, the quirky things to throw the villains off guard, by being funny. That right there is what makes a good comic book. Is not only is it action, but there's some fun involved.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun with him, and it's a blend of everything that you want. You've got angst because there's some real down times for Spider-Man, and then there's humor, there's upbeat moments, and then there's I think it became a thing for a long time. They called it Parker Luck because he was always unlucky.
Yep.
Yeah.
And now he's got the Peter tingle.
I am not familiar with that. I haven't been reading.
Oh, you haven't seen the new movie yet?
No, not the latest one. I'm going to be late. I don't get to see movies when they come out anymore now that I have two kids.
Well, it's true. I agree. I know what you mean. But when you do get a chance to see it, just keep an eye out for Peter Tingle.
Peter Tingle. Okay, I'm going to watch for that. I'm hoping to see it in the next week or so, but fingers crossed.
All right.
Well, hey, I definitely appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. Thanks again.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I love talking nerdy stuff.
All right.
And everything I do is nerdy, so yeah.
Works out good. Well, hey, thanks again. I will let you go, and hopefully we can talk again sometime.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Big thanks to Gil T for taking a moment to chat with me. If you're into anything nerdy, make sure you check out his podcast. And if you're in the WTYE 101.7 listening area, make sure you give him a listen. Now, one thing I should definitely mention here, our sister podcast, whatever you want to call it, the Shore Manor podcast just started up again last week. That's the one that started it all. My whole love for podcasting began with that series last year. It's the one that Amanda and I started, and it is still dedicated to all things Halloween and all things spooky. We've got a full season lined up, and we're going to run every week of that with that series, running right up until the holiest of holidays, Halloween. Now, as we wrap things up, let me tell you guys some ways that you can get in touch with us if you would like. Shore Manor is on Facebook at facebook.com/Shore Manor. That's SCHORRMANOR. All kinds of great content there, spooky news and goings on, not to mention news about this podcast and our other podcasts. So definitely make sure and follow us there. And, speaking of support, as I mentioned at the beginning of this show, you can actually buy t-shirts from our Facebook page. You can buy some t-shirts, show your friends how amazingly cool you are by sporting a Shore Manor t-shirt. So check that one out. Speaking of support, we also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/Shore Manor. You can get early access to episodes just like this one and others, not to mention some other cool digital content on there. And if you want to reach out to me personally on social media, you can do so on Twitter at @TheMattShore and Instagram at @TheShore. And another great way to get in touch with me, of course, is email. You can email me at mattshore@hotmail.com. And if you need any more information about me, you can find plenty of that on my website, www.mattshore.net. Plenty of information there about stuff that I write, our podcasts, our Halloween decorations, all kinds of great stuff. Feel free to check that one out and find out anything you'd like. So that brings us to a close. Like I always say, make sure you support your local journalist. If you're in that listening area, support Gil T, support WTYE, Support radio journalism just like you support print journalism, just like I tell you to support television journalism. And if you happen to meet one of us on the street and you recognize somebody as a journalist, feel free to let them know that they're doing a good job. They don't hear that nearly enough. So, as we draw to a close, let me just say, once again, keep listening and keep reading. Thanks.